Red Bull is on the verge of institutional collapse. Helmut Marko's departure has left Max Verstappen without his main internal ally, and talks with other teams are a real threat. Are we witnessing the beginning of the end of the Red Bull empire in Formula One? On December 9, 2025, just 48 hours after Verstappen lost a championship that seemed his, Red Bull announced the departure of Helmut Marko, the man who not only discovered the three-time Dutch champion, but also shaped every corner of the Red Bull racing project from its foundations. And that single phrase, Helmut Marko is leaving, changed everything. It's not a retirement. It is not a voluntary withdrawal. It's a dismissal, a break, a reckoning between generations, visions, and powers. And behind that decision there is a silent war, a network of betrayals, mistrust, and ambition that threatens to take down the entire team. And this is where Max Verstappen comes in. Because the most dominant driver of the hybrid era is no longer safe. You no longer have control. He no longer has allies. And the most serious thing, he no longer has any reason to stay. What if Max Verstappen is really talking to other teams? What if what is happening at Red Bull right now is not a passing crisis, but the beginning of the end? What if 2025 is the year everything falls apart? Stay. Because what we are going to reveal is not just a personnel change. It is the beginning of a war for the soul of Red Bull. And it can change the modern history of Formula One forever. To understand the magnitude of the earthquake that has shaken Red Bull, you must first see the complete map of the disaster. This did not start with the departure of Helmut Marko. His dismissal was just the latest chip to fall in a domino effect that has been quietly brewing for months, even years. And when everything that happened is connected, the panorama becomes chilling. Until not so long ago, Red Bull was a perfectly oiled machine. Every piece fit. They had the longest-serving director of the paddock, the most legendary engineer in modern motorsport, the sharpest strategist, and the most dominant driver of the hybrid era. But one by one they began to fall. Red Bull has ceased to be an independent racing team and has become a corporate company with a suit and tie. And the problem is not just the change, but the timing. Because all this happens just before the most radical regulation change of the modern era, the 2026 regulation that can completely change the hierarchical order in Formula One. Without Newey, without Horner, without Wheatley, without Courtney, and now without Marko. Red Bull enters this new era without the minds that built its dominance. It's like taking away a football team's coach, its sports director, its physical trainer, and its captain in the same year, and expecting it to continue winning. And as if that were not enough, the driver who supports the entire structure, Max Verstappen, begins to look suspiciously. What is he seeing from the inside that we don't know yet? How much longer will it take for him to take the step that the others have already taken? This is not a simple transition stage. It's a collapse in slow motion. And the more details we learn, the clearer it becomes that the Red Bull empire is in ruins. For almost 2 decades, Helmut Marko was much more than a sports advisor at Red Bull. He was the clinical eye that detected talent when no one else saw it. The invisible architect behind the most successful project of the modern era. He discovered Sebastian Vettel when he was just a promise. He trusted Max Verstappen when everyone said he was too young. He oversaw the young pilot program as if it were his private kingdom. And no one dared to question it, until now. Officially, Marko said goodbye in a neat, emotional statement full of gratitude. He spoke about how losing the championship by 2 points affected him deeply, that it was the right time to close a glorious era. But any fan with any memory knows that Marko would never leave for losing a title. He survived internal scandals, engine failures, cycles of defeats, and rebuilding. If something characterized him, it was his ability to resist. This time they didn't let him resist. The reality is much harsher. Marko was fired. And not for a single reason, but for an accumulation of errors, disagreements, and tensions that exploded at the same time. The first bomb exploded inside the offices. Marko unilaterally signed 2 drivers without consulting the new Red Bull leadership. One of them, Alex Dunn, was convinced to leave the McLaren program to join the Red Bull system. But when the news reached Laurent Mekies and Oliver Mintzlaff, the order was immediate. Cancel the contract, compensate the pilot, and assume the cost of the image. An operation that Marko carried out as if he still lived in the era of Mateschitz, when he made decisions and others obeyed. But that Red Bull no longer exists. The second case, Arvid Lindblad, was even more controversial. Marko signed him for racing bulls without consulting anyone. And although the pilot was eventually accepted, the fact that another hire occurred without approval showed that Marko no longer respected the new chain of command. His power operated on autopilot. But Mintzlaff and Mekies were no longer willing to allow that kind of autonomy. The third and final crack was public, scandalous, unforgivable. During the Qatar Grand Prix, in the middle of the battle for the title, Marko suggested that Kimi Antonelli, the young Mercedes debutante, had deliberately let Lando Norris pass to favor him in the fight against Verstappen. He said it on television, he repeated it later, and Max's engineer, Gianpiero Lambiase, backed it up. The consequence was immediate. A wave of hatred poured out on Antonelli on social networks, including death threats. Mercedes was forced to issue a statement. Red Bull, for the first time in years, had to publicly recant. And here's something symbolically important happens. Marko apologized. Not because he wanted to, but because he was forced to. And in doing so, he accepted something he had always avoided, that his words no longer had power, that their decisions had consequences, that his days were numbered. In internal meetings, Red Bull's top brass called the incident the straw that broke the camel's back. Privately, they began referring to Marko as a loose verse, a reputational risk. He was no longer a mentor. He was a threat to the team's image. Thus, Marko's departure was not the end of an era. It was a purge, a political execution. And the most disturbing thing is that Max Verstappen, the man Marko guided since he was 16, could do nothing to prevent it. Or worse yet, he didn't want to. At this point, everything becomes an inevitable question. How does this affect Max Verstappen? Because Helmut Marko's departure is not just a change in the organizational chart, nor is it just another internal decision. It's a personal blow. And perhaps, the most painful that the Dutchman has received since he arrived in Formula One. Marko was not just an advisor to Max. He was his protector, his mentor, his sporting godfather. He was the one who fought to get him into Formula One at just 17 years old, who confronted the more traditional directors of the paddock when they said he was too young, too aggressive, too immature. She was the one who defended him in his mistakes, who celebrated his successes and who shielded his environment from external pressures. In a world as ruthless as F1, where internal politics can destroy races in a couple of weekends, Marko was the only real ally Verstappen ever had, and now it's gone. But the most disturbing thing is not that Marko is no longer here. The truly disturbing thing is that Verstappen couldn't stop him. He didn't move a single piece. He didn't use his influence. He did not raise his voice publicly. He dropped it, and that has set off all the alarms. Internally, the Verstappen environment has begun to emit signals, and they are not optimistic. Sources close to the driver have confirmed that there are already informal conversations with other teams. Mercedes, Aston Martin, and Ferrari are aware. Jos Verstappen himself has been brutally honest. Max wants to win. If Red Bull can't give him a winning car, we'll see what happens. These types of statements are not thrown out at random. They are messages, public pressure, conditionals that function as warnings. And in the paddock, everyone understands what they mean. Max does not have infinite patience. The performance clause in his contract, which many believed was symbolic, could be activated. Red Bull needs to deliver a competitive car, not to win single races, to fight for the championship. And if that doesn't happen, Max is legally free to leave before the end of his contract. The door is ajar, and more than one team is waiting on the other side. We must remember something important. Verstappen is not sentimental. He is loyal, yes, but only as long as the project works. And this project no longer works as before. The loss of internal confidence is evident. The RB21 has not been at the expected level in the first races of 2025. The sporting decisions are erratic. The Milton Keynes environment no longer offers stability or clarity. And now, the last bastion of independence, the last name with authority within the structure, has disappeared. And there is a detail that goes unnoticed, but is devastating. Marko's replacement does not exist. There is no figure that takes his place with the same decision-making capacity. There is no strong voice protecting Verstappen within the leadership. He is alone. For the first time in his career, Max is completely alone. The critical point is the calendar. The 2026 regulatory change is approaching. A new generation of cars, new engines, new aerodynamics. For a driver like Max, who has already conquered everything that could be achieved under the current regulations, the next cycle must begin with a winning car. Not a promising one. Not a competitive one. A dominant one. And this is where Red Bull has a monumental problem. It no longer has Newey, its technical genius. He no longer has Marko, his link to the future. He no longer has Horner, his institutional shield. With what tools can you promise Max that the 2026 RB will be the best car on the grid? The pressure is enormous, and it feels. The atmosphere in Milton Keynes is more tense than ever. Every race, every result, every failure in strategy, every failed update counts. Because Max isn't waiting to see what happens in 2 years. He is watching what happens now. He is watching to see if the team reacts, if it makes smart decisions, if it shows signs of evolution. And if he doesn't see them, he won't hesitate to leave. With the departure of Helmut Marko, the last link between Red Bull Racing and the era that defined it is broken. And what it leaves behind is not only a power vacuum, but an existential question. What is Red Bull without its founders, without its visionaries, without those who turned risk into routine and audacity into culture? The domino effect is already underway. Verstappen is sorry. The paddock perceives it, and the fans sense it. When a team starts making decisions that contradict its own history, the next thing that comes is uncertainty. And when leaders are replaced by anonymous structures, by figures who respond to Excel rather than the stopwatch, everything that was differential is diluted. Will Red Bull be able to rebuild an identity under this new corporate direction? Or will we see the beginning of a downward cycle disguised as modern management? Can a team survive when those who built it no longer have a voice, and when its main star is already contemplating other paths? Do you think Marko's departure was inevitable? Or was it a strategic mistake that could cost them more than they imagine? Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.